Welcome to the Hard Count with JD Piquel. Without JD Piquel, Marvel and Star Wars Productions and Chess says, I hope JD is back. Pray hands, pray hands. No. As Day says, JD is on baby duty. Duty spelled D-O-O-D-Y. I love the double entendre. I'm Andy Staples. He's Ari Wasserman. We also work at On3. We are JD's co-workers. We are so happy for him, because I believe the blessed event had not occurred when we filled in for him on the last episode of the Hard Count. It has now occurred. JD's a dad. And who better to have as your dad than JD? Come on.
Yeah, I mean, he just fills up the room with love. I love that guy. Happy to be here. If you like JD, I don't blame you, but we're going to do our best. So, yeah, let's get into the show, Andy, and let's ride. Let's rip some takes.
We have predictions coming up, because this is a Tuesday. Tuesday on the Hard Count is a day for predictions. So we got predictions for Indiana, Ohio State, for Texas A&M, Auburn, for Colorado, Kansas, and, of course, for Army Notre Dame at Yankee Stadium. But first, let's talk about a little news. The coaching carousel is a little bit different this year, Ari. The big jobs do not seem to be popping. It seems like all the power conference schools are sitting back saying, you know what? All these buyouts are too expensive. We're going to have to conserve money for revenue sharing next year. So we're going to sit this one out. Meanwhile, in the group of five, it's popping all over the place. Like you had Temple the other day. So on Monday, you had Tom Herman fired at Florida Atlantic. You had Biff Poggi fired at Charlotte. And the Biff Poggi one, I got to say, kind of hit me in the feelings, because I want to live my life like Biff Poggi, a life without sleeves. And I'm just sad this didn't work. Like, it's crazy. It's less than a year in, and it didn't work.
Yeah. And he was the first guest on your show at On3, wasn't he?
He was not the first guest. He was the first guest to smoke a cigar on the show. It was pretty tremendous.
We gotta bring that.
You have that clip somewhere.
Yeah, AJ Hawk does that. I don't know how my wife would feel if I started smoking cigars during the show, but it seems like a wonderful place to be, Andy.
Good question. I'm gonna keep my cigar lit.
No problem. It was awesome. That's one of my favorite interviews ever. But it didn't work. It was a bold hire by Charlotte AD Mike Hill, because Biff's backstory was he very successful in business, hedge fund manager. He had created from scratch basically a high school program in Baltimore, or he'd taken over one that had been in disrepair and turned it into a national powerhouse. He was a consigliere to Jim Harbaugh at Michigan, but it didn't work out.
Yeah. He's gonna be okay. That's a guy that's going to land on his feet.
Millions of dollars that he already made are going to. Yeah.
Yeah. The bold hire trend, I feel like, I don't know if it's related to Dion, but like you have the Dion new way to do things, or new personality,
different way of doing
somebody.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that I'm into that at places that feel like they could use that jolt. I know that Trent Dilfer, is giving it a run too, and I guess if you are in a place where you're ready to take a shot, you take the shot. And if the shot doesn't work, then you move on to the next one. So it's a shame that it didn't last very long. Sometimes I wonder if you do take an alternate path and getting somebody who isn't from just the coaching ranks, that was an offensive coordinator, for 5 years in the MAC and did the progression, that you probably should afford that person more time, right? Like if you're going to take the risk and invest in the risk, but
like these jobs are hard. Like Charlotte's hard, FAU's hard, because Herman was fired in the midst of year 2 as well. And these jobs are not easy, and they're hitting the eject button fairly quickly, it feels like, on some of these. So I do wonder how that affects the candidate pool. Now, I think what I think a lot of them are doing is looking at the fact that there aren't Power 5, I said it again, power conference jobs open, and saying, well, maybe the pool will be deeper if they're not open. But I think they're just competing against big time coordinator jobs. They're going to pay like double what some of these jobs pay.
Yeah. What do we call the group of 5 now? Is it still the group of 5?
For now, it's going to be the group of 6 when the Pac-12 reforms.
Yeah.
With
Because
more
I've been
members.
using group of 5 a lot. And I wasn't sure if that was still correct, but yeah,
It's correct right now.
I'm actually kind of shocked that the Tom Herman one didn't go well. Because like I thought I feel like FAU and Houston have a lot in common in the sense of like near a bunch of talent at a place that, has been successful at times in the past. And I just thought that I think Tom Herman's a really good offensive mind, and I thought he got a lot out of Houston during that time he was there. And I thought that was something that he'd be able to duplicate. Maybe he, needed to, go back to a lower level and get out of the spotlight and just go do what he does best, which is draw up plays and be himself before taking another crack at a big time job. But that didn't last long at all. And I was fairly surprised by that one.
Well, let me ask you another question, because there are a bunch of big coordinator jobs open. Oklahoma's open, Wisconsin's open. We expect some other jobs to open up here soon. We've talked about, Joe Sloan being in danger at LSU. If you are Tom Herman, or I guess another way to ask it is if you are, let's say, Brent Venables, who is hiring for a job like this, is Tom Herman somebody that you'd be looking at for that level of offensive coordinator job? If you're Luke Fickell looking for an offensive coordinator at Wisconsin.
Well, my only exposure to Tom Herman as an offensive coordinator resulted in a team winning a national championship with a third-string quarterback. So, my viewpoint of him is, he's a very successful person and knows how to draw plays. So, for me, I think that makes sense, especially if you have that on your resume. We talk a lot about resumes in the college football playoff, but when you talk about resumes for actual coaches and what they've done in their career, I think that Tom Herman has a pretty impressive resume. And, to me, running a program and all the things that it takes nowadays is so much less about football than it used to be. It's about NIL and, boosters and meetings and speaking engagements and roster management and stopping people from transferring and roster management and saying I feel like if you want to, it's just like you saw Chip Kelly do it at Ohio State, right? Some people just don't thrive in that environment and don't want to do it. I'm not saying he could never be successful at it, but if you wanted to hire somebody to organize your offense and call good plays, he strikes me as somebody who is qualified to do that.
It's interesting that you say that. There's guys that don't want to do that or maybe aren't suited to doing that as a head coach. I have a story coming out later today at On 3 about Jim Mora at UConn. And remember, Jim Mora had been an NFL. This is Jim Mora Jr. His dad is the one who said, playoffs? Talk about playoffs? That's his dad, who coached the Saints and the Colts. But Jim Mora Jr. was the head coach of the Falcons, and he was also the head coach of the 49ers. And Seahawks. But he took the Falcons to the NFC Championship game. Then he was at UCLA. He had double-digit win seasons a couple times at UCLA. He's at UConn right now, and he's 7-3. They're playing Syracuse this week. There's a legit, if they could upset Syracuse, they're playing UMass the following week. They could legitimately win 9 regular season games at UConn. They have 3 losses. They got killed by Maryland, but they had 1 possession losses to Duke, which is a good team, and Wake Forest, which is a not as good ACC team. The Wake Forest game ended on a pretty horrible non-call that you've seen the clip of Jim Mora going off on. But the point of this is, Jim Mora came up through the NFL system. He came up as an NFL coordinator and head coach, and none of this bothers him. None of all that new stuff bothers him at all. He loves that. He's so accustomed to it. It's I'm back in my element. And I think that's interesting because as you look for coaches at this level, you've got to understand who's cut out for that and who's not. And UConn may have lucked out in getting a guy that was naturally suited for the era.
Do you view him as somebody who should get another look at a bigger job as a head coach?
Yes. If you can win, he's going to probably win 8 games in the regular season at UConn this year. That should be the most, UMass is probably the most impossible job in FBS football. But UConn's close. If you're an independent not named Notre Dame, you're essentially set up to fail. And he's going to win at least 8 games.
Yeah.
That's pretty telling.
Also
good.
recruited
It's good
pretty well at
evaluation.
UCLA.
Yeah.
And
oh yeah.
and got double-digit wins at UCLA too. Yeah, it's interesting. Also, too, it's just like we had this discussion when the NIL stuff started of there's a big fear of NIL driving college coaches out of the game because they don't have the temperament or the desire to deal with the financial aspect of this. But what about NFL coordinators and NFL assistants who are in that world every day becoming more qualified to be really good college coaches now that the games are starting to mirror each other a little bit from the financial aspect? So like at times, you always hear during hires, this person was in the NFL for this many years, or like Jeff Hafley, when he got hired at Ohio State and I was on the beat, I was like, hey, he has an NFL background, and Ryan Day has an NFL background. And like, that used to be just like a cool recruiting pitch. But now like having an NFL background might make you more suited to excel in building a roster and maintaining a roster in college.
Well, I think that's exactly right. And I wonder if it might lure some people back, because I remember Brian Johnson, the former offensive coordinator at Utah. He was a quarterback at Utah on that 2008 undefeated team, but he wound up being the OC at Utah. He wound up being the quarterbacks coach under Dan Mullen at Florida. He's in the NFL now. Now, he has said he loves the NFL lifestyle, wouldn't necessarily want to come back to college, but I wonder, is that somebody that a college AD might reach out to and say, hey, look, I realize you like the NFL, but you could be a head coach, a major college head coach, if you play your cards right. Would you consider coming back?
Well, what's a better job?
Legit.
What's a better job, being a coordinator in the NFL or being the head coach of a middle tier program in the college?
I think it's coordinating the NFL from a lifestyle standpoint, because you're talking, we say a middle tier power conference team in college.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, would you rather be the offensive coordinator for the Cincinnati Bengals or the head coach of Purdue?
Okay, now that's a different question, because the head coach of Purdue is going to make $4 million plus. So
yeah,
I think that's a good question. So that,
because the thing that I think is so interesting about the NFL, Andy, and I don't know why this is the case, but in college and college fans, people know who the offensive coordinator is or the defensive coordinator is at the big time schools. Like, and I don't know that like it is. I don't know if it's just culturally you have to know them because of recruiting and because the coordinators and the assistants are always out there trying to get you players, and that's what makes you more familiar. But like, I don't know who the defensive coordinator is for the Carolina Panthers. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know who the offensive coordinator is for the Chargers. Like, I mean, there's like the coordinators in the NFL.
Jim
level.
Harbaugh is the offensive coordinator. Actually, Greg Roman's the offensive coordinator for the Chargers.
I should have known that time, considering
Jim
he took
Harbaugh.
the entire Michigan staff. You don't patronize me. You know,
Greg wasn't on the Michigan staff, but yes.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying.
Greg has worked for a Harbaugh brother in a lot of places.
But coordinators and assistants in the NFL live in relative obscurity, don't they?
Right.
Like
Ben Johnson is probably the one everybody can name right now, the Lions offensive coordinator, because everybody wants him as their head coach. But that's
the only time they come up is during NFL coaching searches. But like, I don't like every single time I see people criticizing an NFL decision on Twitter, I see them criticizing the head coach. Like, I don't really see like, oh, the linebacker. Like when I was at Ohio State covering Ohio State, like fans would go crazy about the linebacker coach.
Yeah.
Like people went nuts for Bill Davis one year. And it was just like the only thing people talked about. And it was like, do people know, like, if you're a Browns fan and an Ohio State fan, do you know who the linebacker coach is on the Browns? My point is that there is a certain level of like, on one hand in the NFL, you can say that you've reached the highest level of football. Coaching in the NFL is a nice feather in your cap from an ego standpoint. But if you are somebody who is keeping score in the ego department, Andy, being a head coach in college football definitely is a bigger attention receiver than being a coordinator in the league. And the money at the big time programs in the Big Ten, and not even the Big Ten, just the money that's coming in. You saw Indiana got SIGs extended for 8 years. That wouldn't have happened 3 years ago, I don't think.
I'm glad you mentioned the Browns. I'm glad you mentioned the Browns, because Tommy Rees is their tight ends coach right now. He was the Alabama OC last year. Yeah. Like, I think Tommy Rees is going to wind up in this carousel, because let's say LSU moves on from Joe Sloan. Well, guess who's been Brian Kelly's OC before? Tommy Rees. Like, I could see that happening. We got a question in the chat from Desu.
Did you just know that? You just knew that he was their tight ends coach?
I talked to people about potential coaching moves, and that's one that I've talked to a lot of people about last week.
I lost completely. Did you know that before last week?
Yeah.
Yeah, I lost track of that one. I had no idea where he was.
Yeah, the Browns have a pretty deep staff. Like Mike Vrabel's a consultant for them right now, too.
I saw that, yeah.
But Desu in the chat says, who's taking the offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator jobs at Florida State? That's a great question. I don't know on the DC. It sounds like that's one, normally you've heard a lot of names by this point. I have not heard a lot of names for the DC at Florida State. And that's one you kind of have to you have to decide on philosophy. You have to decide on a lot of stuff because Mike Norvell is an offensive guy. Joe Craddock from Tulane is a name I've heard for the OC job. Now, what's interesting about the OC job at Florida State is Mike Norvell calls the plays at Florida State. And so, like Alex Atkins was the OC, but he was really the O-line coach, the OC in name only. So the question is, do you get more input on the offense? Is it your offense that you're bringing? Are you learning Mike Norvell's offense? How does that actually work? And also, are you bringing your own O-line coach? Because the firing of Alex Atkins means there's no O-line coach. They fired the receivers coach as well. So presumably they're going to let that person bring some people that they can work with. But I think that's always an interesting question. Also in the state of Florida, the big question is, will Billy Napier hire a play calling OC? Is that one of the conditions for him to return next year, which I think it might be? And who would he hire?
Yeah. It is kind of fun to do it, Andy, at this level, though, just like the coordinator thing, more than the head coach thing, right? Because the coordinator thing is we talk so much about the head coach, but if thinking about philosophy of what you need and what you want to fix the issues that you have, it's like, with that Florida one specifically, it's like you need to get the right guy to make DJ Lagway excel. Like, that's not an easy proposition.
But I also think since Billy Napier's been calling the plays, like, he's only going to take somebody who aligns philosophically with him. Like, so I've seen the names like Cade Bell from Pittsburgh is a name that's been out there. So if Cade Bell, obviously there's a Florida connection because his dad is Kerwin Bell, who played at Florida. And that makes sense. But that offense is kind of like a spread out version of the fun and gun, the Steve Spurrier offense, which is not really that similar to what Billy Napier runs. Like, I would guess Billy Napier would want someone who's more stylistically like him. And like Brennan Marion, the UNLV OC's name has come up for a lot of these jobs. Like, if you hire Brennan Marion, you're crazy if you're not hiring him to bring his offense, to bring the
go offense is electric.
So you gotta think about these things when you're talking about these jobs, because some coaches don't want something that is completely different. They don't want to go away from what they've been doing. Some do. Like, I think with the Wisconsin job, the question, like, I would love to give Luke Fickell truth serum right now and say, what offensive philosophy do you want? Because then that would help me figure out who he wants to hire.
Yeah, and with Wisconsin, Andy, it's like the offensive philosophy that you want might not be the one that you can execute, right? Like, that's the biggest decision. It's like, I'm sure Luke Fickell would love to have an offense that throws the ball around and, is very dangerous through the air, but it's whether or not he can look in the mirror and be like, we can actually execute this. Like, we can bring the players to Wisconsin that we need in order for this to work. Because, like, that's the thing. It's like, the hard part is getting the players. The easy part's designing the offense that make those players look good. And I think you find programs who lack identity when they try to make players who don't fit a system match the system that they want. So it's like with Wisconsin, is their best and only option to be a run the ball 40 times a game, run under, I formation and do like the old Wisconsin thing? Or do they actually have the ability from a talent acquisition standpoint to execute what it looked like Luke Fickell was trying to do from the beginning in hiring Phil Longo?
Yeah. And they still have a pretty good offensive line. Like, I feel like when they've needed to run the ball, they've been able to run it in spite of not really being able to throw. So they've actually been successful running the ball into loaded boxes, which tells you their offensive line is really good.
Which makes you feel like that's just Wisconsin again, because I was watching the game Saturday night,
more
Andy.
into that. Yeah.
I mean, they ran the ball really well against Oregon, and that's a team that, we think could win the national title this year. So, yeah, and it's like if you lean into that, though, then you also have to have the other side of the coin, which is, are you limiting your program ceiling? Because Wisconsin leaning into the run game was great when they were playing Iowa and Minnesota and, Michigan State and teams like that, but it didn't really work well when they played Ohio State. So, I think that Luke Fickell was brought to Wisconsin with the hope and the vision that one day Wisconsin would be a team that is able and, expected to win playoff games against teams that are loaded for talent at the skill position. So it's like, I think before you answer what type of offense does Wisconsin want or what kind of offense does Luke Fickell want, the truth serum question that you asked Luke Fickell is, do you think you can get elite level receivers on this team? Like, can you do it? Like, could you get one Ryan Williams to play in Madison?
I think if the money's right, you could, and the quarterback's right. And like a name I've seen for Wisconsin is Ben Arbuckle, who's the Washington State OC, who's really good, 29 years old, but he's an air raid guy, like Phil Longo, comes from, the same family tree. Like if you're going to go air raid again, I think you'd want one from the Dana Holgerson branch, probably more than you'd want one from anywhere near the Leach branch, because Holgerson adapted it a little. The Lincoln Riley branch too. They've adapted it a little bit so that I think you could have that as your backbone of your offense, but they can do some things that work with what Wisconsin is actually good at.
But I think I want to what that hire will tell you is what Luke Fickell thinks.
Yeah, exactly.
I think you're going to.
And that's why I wish he'd just tell me what he thinks so that we can
tell you. He's going to tell you when he makes the hire. He'll tell you.
Okay. Well, Marvel and Star Wars Productions asks, can you guys talk about what Lane Kiffin said about the SEC championship? We absolutely can. We talked about this on our show earlier in the morning. Let's hear what Lane said on Monday about the SEC championship.
It's changed. The conference championship, could have a big impact both ways for people. So I've talked to other coaches, so I'll just kind of give you the feeling from some other coaches that, they don't want to be in it. The risk to get a bye, the reward to get a bye versus the risk to get knocked out completely. I mean, that's a really big risk, just to get a bye. So I think it's ended up being a very unique situation of all, postseason sports, the way that system's set up there, and how you could go to that and get knocked out, and if you don't go, you're in. Questions? I'm not a big gambler, but that's kind of one of them Vegas, like poker table things, like that's all in. And you're going all in the best conference in football, so you got to play somebody great too. Very different than a lot of these other conferences.
So there's a follow-up to that question as well, and I thought Lane's answer to that was also interesting.
And just to follow up on it, do you feel like it's inadvertently maybe diluted the meaning of not just the SEC, but some of these other conference championships that weekend?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's a secret. I think it definitely has. So that just is what it is. There's a cost and benefit to everything. There's great benefits to this playoff system and so many people being excited and fans and programs and more games. And then there's cost too. The conference championships don't mean as much. And it's not just, do you potentially get knocked out by losing it? Do you go get more injuries? So you're going to go get more injuries, play another game to get a bye, but then the other people are having a bye while you're playing. So I think that's why, and you can go on record of saying it, why a lot of coaches or some coaches I've talked to don't want to go to it.
He said it out loud. We've said it a bunch of times on these shows, hypothetically, but this is an SEC coach saying that out loud.
And he's not wrong. That's the thing. I think that this too, Andy, is a byproduct, and we didn't talk about this on our show, so I want to take it in a different direction. Okay,
Sure.
but I got into a debate last night, or not a debate, a discussion on Twitter with a bunch of people, Tom Fornelli, and I don't know if you saw it, but this is also the byproduct of having 18-team conferences where the best teams, some get good draws, some get bad draws. They all play each other, and you get 6-2, 6-2, 6-2, 6-2. Whereas in the past, you were probably less likely to get penalized by playing in your conference championship game because there weren't 3 other teams with the same record right behind you. Like, that's the hardest part of this whole thing. It's like, this isn't just a should you make the SEC championship game because if you lose, you're out discussion. This is, has conference realignment messed up the balance of the sport so much that the conferences aren't, like the SEC itself can't even figure out who the right champion will be without us talking for 20 minutes about a coin flip potentially happening. And we're going to try to figure out who should make the playoff. They can't even figure out who the conference champion is. And it's like,
They can't figure out who's playing for the conference championship.
It's November 19th right now, and I have I don't even know the scenarios off the top of my head. You need to go use a calculator to figure out who's going to get into the game. And it's like, yeah, I understand that first of all, everybody thinks conference realignment sucks, right? Like, we all can collectively agree that what they did is stupid and sucks. Like, am I off on that?
The leagues are too big. Like, the most perfect conference of late was that 10-team Big 12. Like, that made sense. You played a full round robin. But yeah,
but I don't think that Lane Kiffin would have said what he would have said if we just had the conference alignments from 2019 still.
I think you're probably right. But you'd also have divisions, but you could have the smaller conferences and get rid of divisions, and I think that would help. But yeah, 16-team Big 12, 16-team SEC, 18-team Big 10 is too big. And this is what you get.
It's happening in the Big 10 too. It's not just the SEC.
Correct.
It's happening right there in the Big 10 because Indiana and Penn State, who would have played each other in 2019, did not play each other this year. So at the end of the road, if Ohio State beats Indiana on Saturday and then loses to Oregon, then you're going to have a discussion about how good Indiana and Penn State are, and you don't even know. We never got the benefit of watching them play. Meanwhile, they both got to play Washington, who shouldn't even be in the league to begin with. It's stupid. It makes no sense that there's a West. I know that, again,
right? You understand from a business standpoint, but it doesn't make sense.
It makes sense because they make more money, and I get that. But we're also, with all of these nonsensical changes, eradicating the spirit of the sport and then causing more grab ass in the boardroom. And I still, to this day, when I did the saucy take a month ago on our show about how we were going to run into this issue, you were like, that's not going to happen. There's too much. It's even worse than I could have imagined now. It's I don't even know. We don't know who's the 3rd best team in the Big 10. We don't even know who the 5th best team is in the SEC. We don't know anything because we don't have enough context. There's no regular season because they're all avoiding each other.
See, you think it's a problem.
I like it. I'm happy we get to talk about it, but it doesn't make sense.
It's generated more interest. But yeah, the unbalanced schedule part of it sucks. I wish there was a better way to do the scheduling. And the Big 10 schedule this year, you couldn't have predicted it would work this way.
No way.
But Indiana's draw is so easy compared to Oregon's draw. Look how easy Indiana's draw is.
I know. And you could say, well, match up the brands with the brands to eradicate this, but you can't predict for when an Indiana pops out of nowhere.
Correct.
And the other question is, and we're going to find out on Saturday in a big way, but is Indiana in part because it got the schedule it got? That's, we don't know the answer to that yet. But what if Indiana had to play Georgia's schedule? I know that's a thing that we have to say, but that's a different conference. But we don't know. We don't know beyond the shadow of a doubt. What if Minnesota, a team who maybe that's a bad example. What if Illinois got Indiana's schedule this year?
Yeah, I think Illinois would be. What would Illinois be with Indiana's schedule? Do you think they'd be undefeated? They probably would have dropped 1, right?
They lost to Minnesota, so they probably would have dropped 1. But 2 of their 3 losses are on the road at Oregon and Penn State. 2 games that Indiana didn't have to play. So I think that Illinois would be in these discussions if they played Indiana's schedule, would they not? 2 of their 3 losses are on the road against top 5 teams.
They would. You're exactly right. You're exactly right.
It doesn't make any sense.
And what if South Carolina had played Texas's schedule?
I might write about this. I mean, I wrote about this a month ago, and the headline of that, Andy, was, and I'm so happy I'm getting this off my chest because it's been like bubbling for a while now. The headline to this story was the 12-team college football playoff and the fallacy of it all being settled on the field, because we thought, or we were told, or that was, 12-team expansionist, fodder, that because there are so many teams in the playoff now that we're finally going to get to settle it on the field. And in theory, that makes sense. More teams like Florida State last year and the Baylor TCU situation from 2014 who have been left out in the past are not going to be left out anymore. And I also too, don't want this to sound like I'm being negative towards Indiana, but we have to be honest about it. They are the beneficiary of an easy path. Whether they would have been great with a different schedule, I'm not saying they wouldn't be. I'm just saying they have been a beneficiary of it. We have created a system both with conference realignment and the expansion of the playoff where we have a cluster of teams in the SEC. And if it's the SEC this year, it might be the Big Ten next year. What happens if Michigan's really good this year? And the same thing happens. We're not far removed from Michigan being good again, or Michigan State rising again, and Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon, Washington, and USC. There is, and also too, Andy, I don't know if I'm losing my mind, but just help me out here. In the past, when conference structure was also correlated with the geography of the conference, it was hard for everybody to be really good at the same time because they were all going after the same collection of players. And that's not happening anymore. USC and Washington can be awesome at the same time as Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan. So what's going to happen? In the SEC, it's a little bit more concentrated still because the additions that they had were kind of SEC West.
But the money changes the math too. You're just not going to be able to be as deep, which is also sort of what Lane Kiffin's talking about. But I'm glad you brought up Indiana. We're going to talk about Indiana and Ohio State. We're making predictions for 4 of the biggest games this week, and we're going to start with the biggest. But first, I want to talk about the games tonight. Download that Prize Picks app, the most fun daily fantasy game in America. Use the code HARDCOUNT. Play $5, get $50 to play instantly. There is action tonight. You've got little brothers of quarterbacks who are now college quarterbacks. Ben Finley, little brother of Ryan Finley, former NC State quarterback, former Boise State quarterback too. Ben, his number, playing for Akron against Kent State tonight, 230.5 passing yards. Will he go less than or more than? You pick that square. You decide less or more. You pick another square. Maybe the other square you want to pick is Brett Gabbert, now in his 19th season as Miami of Ohio's starting quarterback. Yeah, that's Blaine Gabbert's little brother. 186.5 for him against Northern Illinois tonight. More or less, you decide. You pick it as few as 2 squares. The more squares you pick, the higher the potential payout. Download that app. Use the code HARDCOUNT. Play $5, get $50 instantly. They will be populating the board for the rest of the college football weekend at Prize Picks. I, for one, cannot wait to see the squares for a few people in the Indiana-Ohio State game, which is what we're going to talk about right now. I want to see Elijah Surratt's square. I want to see Omar Cooper's square. I want to see Travion Henderson's square. I want to see Quinshon Judkins' square. I want to see Will Howard's rushing square. Because, Ari, Indiana gives up 2.5 yards a carry on the ground. Ohio State, when they played Penn State, was playing a team that gives up 3 yards a carry on the ground. But Ohio State averaged 4.5 yards a carry against Penn State. And that was the difference. And specifically, it was what Will Howard did with his legs that opened things up for them, and probably them figuring out what their offensive line was that day.
Yeah. This is going to be a game that is won and lost in the rooms this week, the meeting rooms. And, the thing that I know for a fact, because, I've been smoking on that cig pack, but they're going to have stuff drawn up for this game specifically, right? Indiana's not going to come in here coming off of a bye week and not be prepared to try to hit Ohio State early. And I do actually, if I had to guess, think that Indiana will be ahead early. Like, I think that Indiana is going to be up 7-0 in this game. If I were to bet, I would bet that they would score first. Will Ohio State just fall back on we have more better players, talent situation, or are they going to scheme up stuff that we have not seen them do this year in order to hit Indiana when it matters? And I think that, I've been critical of Ryan Day in the past and also very complimentary of him. I think that he is a very strong offensive mind. And now that he's not calling the plays, the hope is that he has more time to be creative and more time to draw something up or to pull something out of his sleeve, because Ohio State, with a talent advantage, while also hitting somebody with something with the X's and O's that they haven't seen yet, is a pretty hard thing to stop, especially when you have a true freshman receiver who just got named a finalist for the Blitnikoff. Like, they have a lot of really good players, and Indiana, as good as they've been, has not seen a team that's even remotely close to as situated with how many weapons this team has. It's not even, there isn't a team in the same galaxy as Ohio State on their schedule.
No, they've played similar defensive talent against Michigan, but they have not seen the level of offensive playmaking ability that they're going to see against Ohio State. Now, I would argue that Ohio State has only played one team that can stretch the field the way Indiana can, and that's Oregon.
Yeah, and they got hit on a lot of plays against Oregon.
They did, and it's interesting because Oregon, like, their numbers don't show what Tez Johnson and Evan Stewart are really capable of, because they do throw so many passes near the line of scrimmage and maybe they break a tackle and go for 20 yards, but sometimes they do get tackled 5 yards, away from the line of scrimmage. Indiana will go down the field on you. And that's something that Penn State couldn't do it against Ohio State and really hasn't been able to do against good teams at all this season. Indiana can do this. And that's where I think it gets interesting. And again, like we said before, can Indiana's defense hold up against Ohio State's run game? Because you saw when Nebraska was giving Ohio State trouble and making it hard for them to run, Ohio State's offense kind of shut down. Now, part of that was when they were trying to figure out the left tackle situation.
Yeah,
I think we can argue that they figured it out against Penn State. They shifted, and it was really out of necessity because their backup left tackle actually got hurt near the end of the Nebraska game. They had to make some moves. The moves they made actually wound up probably giving them the best 5 they have right now. So this is going to be so fascinating. Ari,
you know how many yards per reception Elijah Surratt is averaging this year?
19.3, something like that,
it's
or
like
18.3,
and then
22 for Mark Cooper.
Yeah, okay, so you did your homework. Okay, they have some dudes on their team, and I think that Indiana will be able to score. Like, I don't think this is going to be some sort of mauling. It's about whether or not they'll be able to last 4 quarters of competitive football against a team that just has a 2 deep, unlike anybody else in college football too. So, like, I think that we are going to find out a lot. But Ryan Day has to, have his team ready and coach his ass off in this game, or they're going to get got. I'm serious, because like Indiana is like a really special team. And again, I know that earlier in the show I was talking about how they are the beneficiary of the Big Ten scheduling situation. But you also can be a really good team and also be the beneficiary of that. Like, it could be.
Well,
both,
I was going to say they can prove that it's not all about the schedule by beating Ohio State. That changes.
I think they've proven that
everything.
It's not all about the schedule by kicking everyone's ass.
That helps.
Yes. I'm not saying that the only reason they're good is because of their schedule, but they're in this position in a large part because they haven't had to go on the road and play Oregon. Like, it's the two things can be true. Indiana could be a playoff team and they could lose to Oregon. Like, it's not one or the other. So
this is a prediction segment. Ohio State's a 12.5-point favorite in this game. Ari, what do you think's going to happen?
I'm changing. I on Monday when we make the predictions, and this is what happens, I've noticed, Andy, where like we'll do our prediction show on Monday, and then you start like reading more about it, hearing other people's takes, just kind of living in that week, and like your brain starts to change a little bit. And on Monday, I thought it would be a closely contested game for 3 quarters, and that Ohio State would have a 7-point lead in the 4th quarter and score 1 more to win by the margin. I still think that, but I don't feel great about it. Like my mind is changing. So I don't know if you ask me again on Thursday, I still think Ohio State's going to cover, but I don't think it's going to be easy. And I do think that there is the potential that Ryan Day is throwing his headset in the fourth quarter at some point. Like, I think that's on the table.
I can see this playing out similar to the Georgia-Tennessee game. And that's where the Ohio State cover comes in. But on our Monday show, I said Indiana's going to cover this game. And I think they are. I don't think they're going to win. I think it's going to be close. I think it's going to be similar to the Ohio State-Nebraska game, which was in the horseshoe also. Now, I think Ohio State probably didn't take Nebraska as seriously as they're going to take Indiana, but Indiana's had a bye week. This is going to be a lot of fun. And it's going to be one of those situations, I think, where if there is a mistake at a key juncture that Indiana can pounce on, they can win this game. But I think if it just sort of plays out, they keep it close, but Ohio State guts out the win.
Well, it also would help too if like Indiana drew up something that helped them get an easy score. I think like a lot of times in games like this, like ease is really important because like even though we were watching the Tennessee-Georgia game and Tennessee jumped out to a 10-point lead early on in that game, did you get the sense that anything was coming easy for Tennessee in that game? Like every single thing that Tennessee did in that game was a battle. And I think when their
touchdown drives, it felt like had to be perfect to get where they got.
And I think that good teams like Tennessee are able to do that. Like they had some perfect drives and they did create some turnovers and were in control of the game early on the road. But what happens in games like that is when teams need to fight for every inch, like it's the last play of the game, by the time you get to the fourth quarter, you just can't do it anymore, which is why Georgia and teams like that are built to the damn breaks. So if Indiana is able to do some things or to create a turnover or to have a short field to make some things easy early, so it's not like they are fighting for every single inch, like at the end of their life, just to get first downs in the first half, then I think they've got a really good shot. But you're going to have a sense, I think, in the first and second quarter, if Indiana is going to be, able to win this game. I think there's a look about it where it's like, okay, like Penn State, for instance, when they played Ohio State, they got out to a 10-0 lead really quickly. They had a pick six, but like it was very apparent very early on that they were probably not going to win. Just based on what it looked like. And I think you're going to get that same sense in this game. And I think Indiana actually is more explosive offensively than Penn State is. So they might have a better shot at doing it. It's just on the road now.
Can't wait to watch. This is going to be so much fun. And if Indiana could pull it off, it would radically change the playoff picture. But I think Ohio State's going to hang on and win. Ari, I think you're in the same boat as me. You're coming toward a closer game, but I think we're probably in a similar boat. Let us move to the loveliest village on the plains. Texas A&M headed to face Auburn. Auburn has one SEC win this season. It's against Kentucky. Texas A&M, last we saw them against an SEC opponent, was losing to South Carolina. Texas A&M is in, to make the playoff, a must-win situation. What also makes this interesting, Texas A&M's first game against Texas since 2011 is coming up next week. Obviously, Auburn has the Iron Bowl, but they play the Iron Bowl every year. This Texas A&M Texas game is the biggest thing in football in the state of Texas this year. It's huge. Vegas sniffs something here because they've loved Texas A&M all season, but A&M's only a 2.5-point favorite in this game.
Mike Elko was asked, I think today or yesterday.
You ready? I got the clip. You ready?
Okay, thank you. I'm happy. I wasn't sure if you had. Yeah.
Yep. Here we go.
There's already so much talk about November 30th. It was announced as a night game today. How do you deal with that with your guys and saying, hey, we still have something ahead of us at Auburn, or is that even a big issue with your team?
I don't think it's an issue. I think when you're in the situation we're in, it's easy to focus on the task at hand. I think, those big games earlier in the year, maybe you look ahead. If we didn't have at stake what's at stake, maybe you would worry about it. I think our focus is single-handedly on on Auburn right now and locked in on what we got to get done.
Whoops.
Whoopsie. Obviously, he was just
Call
slipping.
a Freudian slip, Ari.
But it's perfect. It's
Yes.
just perfect. Andy, we're going to the Texas A&M Texas game. That's going to be my first Kyle Field experience. I don't know if you put that together yet. Like I've never seen a game.
I got told last night, by the way, if we get denied press box seats, if it's too crowded in the press box, somebody's offering us a seat in their suite on the 50-yard line. So just we're good there.
Is there a way that you could rig it so that we can sit in the suite?
I'll see what I can do. See if I can pull some strings.
Yeah, I don't know what the press situation is going to be there, but hopefully we
press box is very nice there. Very nice, very comfortable.
I didn't anticipate that we would be in that position. Are we?
No, we're fine. We're fine. But this is going to be it's going to be huge, and it's the reason we're talking about this as a potential distraction for Texas A&M, because it is. They can't escape it where they are. Whether Mike Elko wants to keep them locked in on Auburn or not, everywhere they go, every person they see is going to ask them about Texas. And they've got to deal with that. They've got to play an Auburn team that, yes, their record is terrible. Yes, they've only won one SEC game, but they have been in all of the games they lost in SEC play except the Georgia game. Auburn is capable of beating Texas A&M if Peyton Thorne doesn't make mistakes, if they run the ball effectively, which they have done for much of the season. Now, they did not do that against Vanderbilt. And that's where I keep looking at this thing, is what Vanderbilt did to Auburn, I think Texas A&M can do to Auburn.
I'm so scared. Because I want...
Why are you scared?
Because I want the A&M Texas game. I know. I want the Texas A&M game and the Texas game to be awesome. I want it to be supercharged. I don't... This game isn't going to do anything for Auburn. Like, they don't need to win. I think they're going to.
I don't know about that, Ari. Because I think I understand what people are coming from. They looked at what South Carolina did to Texas A&M, specifically Rocket Sanders, and they're thinking, okay, Auburn can do that. Like Auburn, if they get the running game going, can pound you up front.
And they get the running game going every week.
Peyton Thorne is not Lenora Sellers. Let me say it louder for the people in the back. Peyton Thorne is not Lenora Sellers.
Yeah, but they got blown out by South Carolina. They just have to lose.
Peyton Thorne is not Lenora Sellers.
Yeah, also Auburn is like the king of winning games like this.
Yes. Or being in it and then losing in just devastating fashion, because I think last year's Iron Bowl is probably the best example of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't wait for this game. And I guess this is probably one of the highlights of the expanded playoff, because this game now matters in conjunction with all that. But
and Vegas sniffing it out this way makes it even better. Mike Elko accidentally saying Texas makes it even better. It's wonderful. I think Texas A&M is going to cover. I think Texas A&M is going to win. I think they're going to frustrate Auburn's offense. I think they might be able to make Peyton Thorne make some mistakes. But even if he doesn't make those key crippling mistakes, he probably winds up being too conservative to win the game, which has been the problem for Auburn. It's been sort of the balance that they can't seem to strike.
Yeah. Oh, Andy, I'm just.
But you got the Tigers in this one.
It just seems like a spot in, like, you know how the sport goes. It's picking a spot. I hope I'm wrong. Never hoped that. Never hoped I was wrong. More.
Now, let's go to the Big 12. We've got the two hottest teams in the league. Two of the three hottest teams, I guess. Colorado, Kansas, and Arizona State. Probably the three hottest teams in the league. So Kansas, terrible beginning to the season. Lots of one-score losses. But they beat Iowa State, and then they knock off BYU, handing BYU their first loss. Colorado is playing better than anyone in the Big 12 right now. They are blowing people out. They're really the only team in the league blowing people out. That said, Vegas sniffed something here. This line opened at Colorado -1.5. It has gone up to Colorado -2.5, but not a ton of faith that the Buffaloes can run away from Kansas. I think this game could be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I don't think that Vegas sniffs anything. I think Kansas is legitimately good. They are so much better than their record. And anybody who has been watching them play the last 3 weeks, because I have, knows they're probably playing they're playing like the way that you anticipated Lance Leipold to have them playing all year. And if you go look at their schedule, they just weren't playing great football at the beginning of the year, and they had a really tough schedule for a Big 12 team. So, Colorado has been blowing everybody out. They're playing well. I put them in my playoff field. Their pass rush is great. They've got the best receivers. They've got a really good receiver who also plays corner. You might have heard of him. I just have a hard time with the Big 12 because you know how this conference is and how it always is. It's been like so Colorado's easy for so long. Like there's going to be a speed bump somewhere. Now, I don't know that I think they're going to lose, but I think there's a really high chance that they do, Andy. Like they could lose this game and throw that conference into a blender as well.
Yeah, it would be very complicated, especially if Arizona State were to beat BYU this weekend. And everybody's got 2 losses in conference play.
But there's 2 ways of looking at it too, because BYU kept winning on the final possession of the game, and everybody's playing in these close games. Like, is it possible that Colorado is just up and away better than everybody else, which is why they keep kicking the crap out of everyone?
That is where I land. So I'm thinking individual matchups. Now, what is interesting about this, Colorado has the best receivers in the league. I think other than Colorado, Kansas has the best corners. It's Mello Dotson and Kobe Bryant.
Yep.
Travis Hunter is the best corner in the league. But those 2 at Kansas are really good. If somebody's got to cover Travis Hunter and Jimmy Horn and LaJohntay Wester, that's who I would like to see covering them.
Yeah, and we got this comment here, Andy, I just want to post. It says, Ari, you stay talking out your ass. Kansas ain't beating CU. The spread is 2.5, guys. Like, this isn't like, I don't think I'm going out on a limb saying that they could lose the game in a 2.5 point spread. Like, I hope they don't. I don't think they will, but like, it's not like I'm predicting they
very
lose.
Smart people think this game could be close. Now,
the line is the line.
I think Colorado is going to win. Daniel in the chat outing himself as a non-ball knower. Travis Hunter isn't leading in any stats as a corner. Best, LOL, what? Daniel, do you understand how playing cornerback works? If you are so good that the opposing team doesn't throw at the receiver you're covering, who, by the way, if you're really good, is the best receiver, you don't collect any stats, but you erase the other team's best receiver, therefore making them change their entire offense. I'm sorry you don't understand football, Daniel.
Vegas said that UCF was beating CU by 14.5. How did that work out? Hey, don't give a damn. Don't bitch at me about it. Why don't you go take some money out of your bank account and go hammer it? You're so smart. You know everything. Go take more money than you're comfortable losing and go bet Colorado minus 2.5. It's that easy, right? Go do it.
Actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, Ari, because I have done this. And you have done this. Although I gave you better odds. Because I do think Colorado's going to win by more than a touchdown here. I think Colorado's winning this game by more than a touchdown because I think they're just, one, their pass rush is awesome. Jalen Daniels is going to have to deal with that. And 2, obviously, I love Shedeur Sanders and Colorado's receivers. So I think they're going to win by more than a touchdown. So I am giving Ari 7 points. If Colorado wins by 8 or more, Ari has to run a 5K the next time we're together. I will jog alongside him and live stream it. Every blessed second of it. If Kansas wins or loses by 7 or less, then I have to pay $20 toward Northwestern's $850 million stadium renovation fund. And if you don't know why that matters, I wrote a column about it yesterday at On 3. Also, Ari gets this box of Donruss Elite from Panini America, which is one of our sponsors over at Andy and Ari. So it's a good deal for Ari if Kansas gets close here. I just don't think they're going to.
Yeah, I mean, also too, like I would bet an inordinate amount of money on this because I don't know that I like the thing that's so crazy is that like I don't even think I disagree with you. Like I think that Colorado is a better football team. Like I don't want that to get lost in translation.
But it's the Big 12. I understand. I don't even play devil's advocate.
You're also giving me 7 points. Like that's just the best of it bet. Like if somebody's going to give me, because 2.5, there's a reason why it hasn't crossed over the 3-point threshold. Like if this was going to be a blowout, the Sharps would be all over it, and it would be 3.5 right now. It's not crossing 3 for a reason. if you're going to give me 7, like let's bet $5,000 on it, because even if I lose, I'm still getting the best of the deal. Like that's just how it works. Like I don't know. And if I have to run, you know what? I could use it. That's what I was thinking.
Steven San Antonio says, are you trying to kill your co-host? Ari can do 3.1 miles very easily. He doesn't think he can. Easily. I'm telling him he can. As someone who does it frequently, it's not that hard, and Ari's in better shape than he thinks.
I don't think that we're gonna. Yeah, I mean, I've been doing the workouts. But I think that like doing like high interval intensity, whatever HIIT training is different than running.
It'll make this seem pretty easy to you. That's harder than this.
Okay. So we'll see.
You're gonna be fine, but it is gonna be funny because I think I kind of want to do it Saturday morning before we drive down to College Station.
Well, we're not going to do that because we're waking up at like 6, so we don't miss any.
But I want it to be like I want to do it as a pregame show. Like I'll be hosting and asking you questions, and you'll be attempting to answer while gasping. It'd be great. It's great television.
I'm not going to attempt to answer anything, and when I get tired, I will walk. I've got news for you.
We would outdraw. Could we outdraw game day and Big Noon? Is that possible?
We do have to come up with our plan because we do need to be there by noon, right? Or by 11.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. Also, the folks with the 50-yard line suite, they're tailgating all day. They want us there. They want us to tailgate with them.
I don't know these people, but if they've got the little, pigs in a blanket with the little weenies, let's just throw a few extra on there for me, okay?
Bro, this is Texas A&M. They got a meat science school.
Yeah.
They got more than that. All right. So I think Colorado's going to win by more than a touchdown. You think Colorado's going to win very close. I'm all right with that.
It's a tough spot. It's just a tough spot.
The chips fall where they may. Let us go now to Yankee Stadium. Army, Notre Dame. In a game that would this would be for the national championship if this were the 30s. But this is a huge stakes Army Notre Dame game. Army is undefeated. Bryson Daly lighting it up at quarterback for the Black Knights. But Notre Dame is a 14.5-point favorite. This is a line that has moved toward Notre Dame since it opened. You saw Notre Dame play an undefeated Navy early in the season, and a lot of the personnel issues that Navy had, Army feels like they will have against Notre Dame, because for those who don't know how the recruiting works in the service academies, they can't take the huge guys. It just doesn't work for the requirements they have at the school, the physical requirements, because remember, these guys are all going to be soldiers. So that is tough in terms of having 300+ pound defensive linemen. They don't. If they have one, it's somebody who's like 301. But a lot of the guys are like 275, 280. Notre Dame is massive across the offensive line. That is what helped Notre Dame against Navy. Now, Navy committing a lot of turnovers also helped. But Ari, I can see Notre Dame just mashing them up front, and that's the problem.
Yeah. I mean, there is a point where just physicality in the trenches is just a unovercomable problem, right? Like, I mean, if you can't hang in there and, hold your line or hold your position, like it's going to be a problem. Why can't there be 300-pound soldiers, by the way?
You need them to be able to run and have a lot of stamina and fit into different vehicles.
So the fitting into the vehicles, I understand, but like there are some 300-pound monsters on LSU's defensive line that can run pretty good.
No. Listen, there's some 300-pound dudes that would, if you sent them out, for the Army or the Marine Corps, they're very
You're
scary.
Making my big ass run 3.5 miles next week. If I can do it, they can do it.
Trust me. The average human is getting bigger, so maybe that's going to help service academies in the future. But right now, they're not out there getting a lot of 330-pound D tackles. There's not.
Yeah.
So this is the problem. What Army's got to do is make Notre Dame make mistakes. They have to suck possessions out of the game, which they will definitely try to do. And then look, if Army can score and hold the ball for a while and get Notre Dame's offense out of rhythm, they have a chance. But if they make some mistakes like Navy did, it's going to be over very quickly.
Yeah. The line movement towards Notre Dame kind of scares me a little bit. Because we have seen Notre Dame against service academies in the past that just like if the service academy is able to dictate the tempo of the game and have a 9-minute touchdown drive, it gets really hard to cover big spreads. Like you have to, if you want to lay the points, you have to assume that Notre Dame's going to score with ease, and you have to, you have to put your faith in the fact that they're going to get stops, and not just stops after a 12-play drive. I mean, like stops and get them off the field. So, like, I actually still very much like Notre Dame. I think the physicality and the difference in the size of these guys is going to be the thing that makes it hard for Army to win or for Army to cover. But like, if Army comes out and goes on the 10-minute drive and is up 7-0, like you can just throw that spread in the trash probably. Like it's just, but like. The other thing too is like Notre Dame's already played a team that runs this offense and has done really well against it.
Different offenses. They're like the Navy offense is a little more wing. Actually, Drew Cronick came in. He ran the wing T at Mercer, and then adapted it to the triple. The Army's triple is different, so they are different offenses. But yes, the base principles of what the defense has to do are the same.
The first time they're facing a team that has elements of the option, which is
and the thing is. Helps. If you play defense at Notre Dame, you play option teams enough because you play Navy every year that you understand if my job's to hit the dive man, I have to hit the dive man. If my job's to hit the quarterback, I have to hit the quarterback. If my job's to hit the pitch man, I have to hit the pitch man.
Like, we don't talk enough about how thankless it is to be an offensive player in the option because you just get blown up all the time, even when you don't have the ball.
The quarterback in the triple, you're volunteering to get your ass beat. You really are. Because you have to get hit. Like the defense has to hit you or you'll bust something. The dive man, the defense has to hit you or you will bust something. Like it sucks. Like that dive guy, that first guy through that back, he's getting pummeled by 3 dudes every play.
Yeah. Yeah. But I like Notre Dame here. I do.
I do too. I like Notre Dame to cover. I just think the size of the offensive line, they should be able to lean on Army a bit. And then also, I just think Riley Leonard has gotten healthy and gotten more comfortable and it really understands his role in the offense now.
Yeah. And, there was a time period there where it was like, this is not working. What's he going to do? Remember? Speculation out there, after they lost to NIU went off the charts. So to see it, work out the way that it has been nice. And I'm excited to see what Notre Dame's ceiling is this year.
That's exactly right. So we both got Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame's going to cover. But there are 4 predictions for you for this week's big games. JD still on paternity leave. We will be back tomorrow on the Hard Count with more fun. We also, you're just going to be sick of us, I think, after a while, because we are live 7 p.m. Eastern time tonight as the rankings are revealed. We'll also be back with our own show at 9:30 a.m. Eastern right here on the On3 Sports YouTube channel. But keep it locked on the On3 Sports YouTube channel. Let's all reconvene at 7 o'clock Eastern time. We're going to see the College Football Playoff Selection Committee reveal those rankings. We'll break down what it all means. And we'll be back again tomorrow on the Hard Count to do the same.